There is a moment that happens in therapy more often than people think. A person sits in front of the therapist and says that they are done with their family. Not because they hate them, not because they want revenge, not because they want drama, but because they are finally tired. Tired of explaining themselves, tired of forgiving the same pain over and over again, and tired of being loyal to people who never protected them. And what makes a therapist pause is not what the person says, it is how calmly they are when they say it. There are no tears, there's no shaking, there's no panic, there's no long emotional speech, it's just straight clarity. The therapist asks them, how do you feel about this decision? And the person sits there for a second, they think about it honestly, then they say, I feel clear. They don't feel guilty, they don't feel confused, not torn between loving their family and protecting themselves. They just feel clear. And that kind of clarity can scare people. Because when someone who used to care too much finally becomes calm, everyone around them starts to feel the change. They said the person became cold. They said the person changed. They said the person lost their heart. But the truth is, this person did not lose their heart. They finally stopped abandoning themselves. This is the part of healing that most people do not talk about. Healing does not always make you softer. Sometimes it just makes you more quieter, which makes you more distant and makes you more selective. Okay, with this less available to people who only loved you when you were easy to use, Carl Jung understood this. He studied people who went through deeper inner change, and what he noticed was not always pretty. He saw that real transformation does not always make a person look nicer from the outside. Sometimes it makes them look colder, less emotional, less available, but inside they are more alive than they have ever been. Because for the first time, they are not living for everyone else, they are living for themselves. Most people think healing means that you have to become kinder, softer, more understanding. They think if you do enough inner work, you will become easier to love. But Jung saw something different, something deep. Sometimes deep inner work makes you harder to control, less willing to explain yourself, less willing to accept disrespect, less willing to give your energy to people who never give anything back. And that is not damage, that is just simple growth. Okay, this is what happens when a person starts becoming who they really are. Today, I want to talk about the awakened empathy, not the fake spiritual version and stuff, not the version that says empathists are chosen, magical, or better than anyone else. I mean the real version, and then the painful version as well. The version that happens when a sensitive person finally asks themselves, why am I like this? You know, when they ask themselves, why do I feel everything so deeply? Why do I feel so responsible for everyone? Why do I feel guilty when I choose myself? Why do I keep saving people who never saved me? This is what real this is where real awakening begins. Not with this special feeling, not with calling yourself gifted and all this. It just simply begins when you start asking the hard question. To understand what awakening empathy becomes, you first have to understand what they were before they woke up. Jung did not look at empathy as some perfect spiritual gift. He saw that for many people, extreme sensitivity was not something beautiful at first. It was a survival skill. It was something they learned because they had to. A child who can sense their parents' mood before a single word is spoken did not always become sensitive because they were born special. Sometimes they became sensitive because they had no choice. They learned to watch the room, they learned to read faces, they learned to notice tone, they learned to feel danger before it even happened. Because in their homes, one small mood change could turn the whole world upside down. The child learned to pay attention to everything. They learned when to speak, when to stay quiet, when to help, when to disappear, when to make someone feel better so they could stay safe. Okay, this was not magic, this was just survival. This is a nervous system learning how to protect itself. This is why so many empathy people became so good at reading people. Not because someone just read them, but because nobody else did. They became expert at others' feelings because their own feelings were ignored. They learned to carry other people's pain because they thought they were the only one to be loved. They learned to be useful. They learned when to be needed. They learned to make everyone else feel comfortable, even when they were hurting inside. And over time, they started thinking about their own personality. Was it just them? They thought, this is just who I am at the end of the day. I am the helper. I am the forgiving one. I am the strong one. I am the one who understands everyone. But a lot of the time, this was not the true self. It was a role they had to play to survive. The problem is that The spiritual world often sells a different story. It tells sensitive people that their pain means they're special. It says they are old souls, light workers, chosen ones, more awake than everyone else, and that story feels good at first, but because if you spent your whole life feeling broken, it feels amazing to hear that maybe you were never broken. Maybe you were just gifted. Maybe all the pain had a purpose. Maybe your sensitivity made you better than the people who hurt you. But Jung would say this can be dangerous because if you call your wound a gift too quickly, you may never heal the wound. You may never ask where it came from. You may never question why you feel responsible for everyone. You may never ask why love feels like sacrifice. You may never ask why peace only feels possible when you are the one suffering in silence. This is a trap. The empathy people start feeling proud about their suffering. They start thinking of their pain can make them noble, but they are still trapped in the same pattern. They are still giving too much, still forgiving too much, still observing too much, still calling it love. Real awakening does not begin when the empathy person says, I am gifted. It begins when they say, what happened to me? Why do I feel like I have to fix everyone? Why do I feel guilty when I rest? Why do I feel selfish when I say no? Why do I feel responsible for other people's emotions? Why do I keep choosing people who need me but they really don't see me? Why do I apologize for having needs? Why do I forgive people when before they even take responsibility? Why do I keep making excuses for people who keep hurting me? These questions are painful because they force the empathy person to see the truth. They force them to look at their life differently. They start looking at their relationships and seeing things they did not want to see. They realize some people did not love them for who they were. They loved them for what they provided. They love the comfort, the attention, the forgiveness, emotional labor, constant availability. The empathy person begins to see that many of their relationships were built on self-abandonment. They were the understanding one, the patient one, the loyal one, the one who never asked for too much, the one who always made room for everyone else, and the one who was always there, and even when nobody was there for them. And the realization hurts because the empathy person has to admit something painful. A lot of what they call love was actually fear of being left, misunderstood, selfish, conflict, and fear of not being needed anymore. They thought they were being compassionate, but many times they were just trying to be saved. They were trying to avoid rejection, abandonment, avoid the pain of someone being upset with them. This is when the old identity starts to break because the helper role was not just something they did, it became who they thought they were. So when they began to question the role, they began to question themselves. Who am I if I'm not fixing people? If I'm not the strong one? If I stop being available to everyone? If I stop letting people disappoint me? If I finally choose myself? This is where empathy stops, or empaths stop. Because what comes next is painful. What comes next is the death of the helper. The helper dies when the empathy person finally accepts the truth. They cannot heal anyone, they cannot save everyone, they cannot love someone because it makes them better. They cannot absorb another person's pain and make it disappear. For years, they have believed that if they loved hard enough, understood enough, forgave enough, and stayed long enough, the other person would change. But that is not what happened. The pain did not disappear, it just moved. It moved from one person into another empathy person. It entered their body, their mind, sleep, peace, anxiety, tiredness. It became everything. It became their sadness. It became their tiredness. Everything. It became stress that never truly left. It became the heavy feeling they could not explain. From the outside, their life might look normal, but inside they were carrying pain that was never there to carry. This is where empathy people have to force the hidden side of compassion. Because even when good things go, they still have a shadow. The shadow of helping is needing to be needed. The shadow of forgiveness is never holding people accountable. The shadow of kindness is letting people cross your boundaries. The shadow of empathy is feeling everyone else so much that you forgot yourself until the empathy faces these hidden parts of sensitivity stays a poison. Stay in poison in a prison. They call it a gift, but it controls them. So what happens when the helper dies? The person who comes out does not look like what people expected. They do not become a sweeter version of the old empathetic person. They do not become more available or easier to use. They become different, more quieter, more private, selective, honest, and firm. And to people who benefit, the old version of this new version feels old and cold. The family might not recognize them. The old friends might not understand them. People might say you changed, and they are right. They did change, but not in a bad way. They stopped betraying themselves to keep everyone else comfortable. The big change is that the awakened empathy person became careful with their energy. The old empathy gave this gave their energy to everyone. Anyone who needed it could have access. Anyone who was sad, angry, struggling, attention. The awakened empathy person does not live like that anymore. They understood that their time and energy is valuable. They are not unlimited. They cannot keep pouring into people who never pour back. They cannot keep showing up for people who disappear when they need support. They cannot keep being loyal to people who only respect them when they are useful. This is not bitterness, and this is just straight wisdom. This is what happens when a person finally understands their own worth. They stop confusing love with self-sacrifice, because real love is not the one person giving everything while the other person only takes. Real love has respect. Real love has honesty. Real love has care on both sides. And when the empathy person understands this, many relationships end. Not because the empathy person became cruel, but because the relationship only worked when the empathy person had no boundaries. The second big change is that awakened empathy person learns to stay uncomfortable, learn to say uncomfortable things. Before, they avoided tension, they hated conflict. If someone was upset, they would rush to fix it. They would again apologize over and over again, would soften their words, take the blame when it wasn't theirs. They would do anything to bring peace back into the room. But now they let the tension exist. They do not rush to make everyone comfortable. They understand that peace is not real if it only exists because they stay silent. Sometimes telling the truth will upset people. Sometimes setting a boundary will disappoint people. Sometimes saying no will make people angry, but the awakened empathy person can handle that now. They no longer believe that someone else's discomfort means they did something wrong. This is a powerful change, okay? Because the old empathy person often rejects their own anger. They thought anger was bad. They thought being firm was cruel. They thought protecting themselves made them selfish. But Jung understood something important. A person who cannot access their anger is not peaceful. They are controlled. Healthy anger protects you. It tells you when something is wrong. It tells you when a line has been crossed. It tells you when you need to stand up. The awakened empathy person can still be gentle. But then now they can also be firm. They can be kind without being weak. They care without being controlled. They can love without allowing disrespect. The third big change is that awakened empathy person learns the difference between seeing pain and being responsible for it. Before, they saw someone hurting, they felt like they had to fix it. If someone was sad, they felt guilty. If someone was angry, they felt responsible. If someone was struggling, they felt like it was their job to save them. But now they understand something different. You can care about someone's pain without carrying it. You can have compassion without rescuing. You can see someone struggling and let them be responsible for their own life. This is real maturity. The feeling no longer controls their action. They can feel deeply without losing themselves. They can notice pain without becoming trapped in it. They can listen without observing. They can love without becoming responsible for another person's healing. The awakened empathy person also becomes more comfortable being misunderstood. The old empathy person needed people to understand them. They would explain themselves over and over again. They wanted everyone to see their heart. They want people to know that they were not being mean. They want people to approve their choices. But the awakened empathy person stopped chasing understanding. They speak the truth once. They explain what things need to be explained, and they let people think what they want to think. If someone calls their boundaries selfish, they can live with that. If someone says they change, they can live with that. If someone understands them maybe on purpose, they no longer beg to see it correctly. This is hard because every empathy person wants real connection. They want to be understood deeply. But real connection cannot happen when people you have to constantly manage. Real connection happens with people who you can see clearly without you having to beg. And to find those type of people, you have to let the wrong people misunderstand you. Another change is that awakened empathy people become more dangerous to the unhealthy people. Not dangerous in a violent way, not cruel or hateful. Dangerous because they see things clearly now. They notice manipulation. They can feel when words and action do not match. They can see when someone is trying to guilt trip them. They can recognize when a family, friendship, relationship is built on control. The old empathy person was easy for unhealthy system. They absorbed attention, kept the secrets, made excuses, carried the pain to try to keep everyone together. The awakened empathy person do not do that anymore. They see the problem, and either they name it or leave. They make unhealthy people uncomfortable because the awakened empathy person no longer playing the role that kept the dysfunction alive. They clearly exposes what everyone else was pretending not to see. But the transformation has a cost. The awakened empathy person becomes lonely in a way the old empathy person may have never experienced. because they have never had this many people around them. People called them, needed them, used them, praised them for being strong. They had a role, they had a place, they had a purpose. But after the awakening, the old role disappears. There are fewer people, fewer calls, fewer obligations, fewer relationships. The relationships that remain may be more real, but they are not as many anymore, and that can hurt. You may sit alone and realize that people you gave years to no longer are in your life. You may realize that some people only stayed because you kept giving. You may realize that when you stop being useful, they stop showing up. You can feel less like freedom and more like exile. Jung did not pretend that this process was easy. The space between the old self and new self can be extremely painful. You have to let go of what was familiar, but you have not fully built what comes next. You are no longer who you were, but you are still learning who you are becoming. The space can feel empty. You may feel lost. You may feel alone. You may miss the old version of yourself, even though the version was suffering. You may miss the relationships, even though they were unhealthy. That is normal, because even a prison can feel like home when you lived in it long enough. The awakened empathy person has to learn a new way of living. They have to learn how to sit with themselves. They have to learn how to be alone without feeling worthless. They have to learn how to rest without feeling guilty. They have to learn how to exist without being needed. And this is not easy. But if they survive this stage, they begin to develop a quieter mind, not loud in power, not the kind of power that needs attention, not the kind that tries to impress people. It is deeper than that. It is the power of a person who knows who they are, a person who knows what they will accept and what they will not accept, a person who does not negotiate with their own boundaries anymore, a person who does not apologize for existing, a person who does not feel deeply without being destroyed, a person who can see things clearly without being forced to fix everything. This is what Jung would call becoming whole. The empathy person moves from unconscious sensitivity to conscious choice. Before, they observed everything automatically. Now they choose. Before, they helped because they felt like they had to. Now they help when it is healthy. Before empathy serves them, they still feel deeply, deeply controlled sometimes. Before empathy person control them, they still notice that other people miss them. They still have compassion, but their sensitivity no longer runs their life. It became a tool instead of a wound. It gives them information. It does not control their behavior. The awakened empathy people is no longer better than everyone else. They are just more spiritual. They are not chosen. They are simply more honest with themselves. They understand their own patterns. They understand their own wounds. They understand why they used to give too much. And because they understand it, they are no longer trapped in it. They know they cannot heal everyone. They know their job is not to save every single broken person they meet. They know their sensitivity does not mean they owe the world unlimited access to them. Most people prefer the old empathy person. Okay, they were always there. They forgave everything. They listened without complaining. They gave and gave. They made people uncomfortable. They did not ask for much. They did not hold people accountable. They were convenient, but the awakened person is not convenient. They ask for honesty. They expect respect. They require effort and demand balance. They no longer let people take without giving back. And to the people who benefited from the old version, they feel betrayed. They may say you became selfish, you are not the same no more, you changed, you lost your compassion, but those words are not the truth. Sometimes those words just mean they lost the access to the version of you they could easily use. If you are going through this right now, you need to understand something. This discomfort does not mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're actually changing in a way that people do not understand. The loneliness does not mean you failed. It means you are outgrowing a life that was built for a version for you that no longer exists. The grief is real because you are losing something. You are losing the old identity. You are losing the role that made people feel comfortable and happy and all this goofy stuff. You are losing relationships that were built on abandoning yourself. The pain is real and the loss is also creating space. The space is for the real you, not the version trying to please everyone, not the version loved only because you were useful, not the version that had to perform, observe, rescue, and forgive everything. The real you and the only real you, the person underneath all of that, the person who deserved to exist the whole time. What the awakened empathy person became is not perfect. It is not prettier, it's not softer, it's just more real, more honest, and more human and more raw. Sometimes someone who can feel something without being destroyed by it, someone who can notice pain without being forced to fix it, you can become someone who can love deeply without losing themselves. This is the real transformation, not because a better version of the old self, but building a completely different relationship with yourself, a different mindset that you can actually control. A relationship where sensitivity is a tool, not a wound, where perception is a choice, not a compulsion, where love is something you offer, not something you owe, Where boundaries are not walls, they are structure of self-respect. The truth is, the transformation does not look like the version people sell online. It's not always beautiful. It's messy. It's lonely. It's grief. It ends relationship. It makes you harder to control. It makes you harder to use. It makes it more difficult for unhealthy people to deal with, but it also makes you real. And if you are living through this transformation right now, even through the painful part, you are more further along than what you think. You are not failing. You are just becoming cold. You are not broken. You are just becoming conscious. You're seeing what you used to ignore. You are facing what you used to hide. You are turning the wood into wisdom. That transformation will not be pretty. And that is the truth. At the end, the truth will always set you free. And that's it. If you guys want more information, go to suityu.org, SUITYOU.org, down in the description. Come join the community. I'll see you guys next time.